Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing a bit of Greenskin against Dark Elf action on the map Stir River. So, of course, the Greenskins do have a bit of a mix. They're currently kind of a little bit weaker, I would say, in the current matchup, but nonetheless, the current set of matchups, but nonetheless they do have some pretty fun and powerful options. And I really wanted to give a shot to sort of a rather wide and more skirmish and light cavalry heavy build. So I dispensed completely with, for example, the Orc Boarboy big guns, which has generally been a staple of most of my compositions, and instead I brought a whole bunch of skirmish scouts, so we'll see how things go. For my lord, I did decide to bring Azag. Of course, Azag does have the Lore of Death, and I only brought Fate of Buna as well as Spirit Leech on him, and kept him on foot. The main reason I did not put him on Skull Muncher is because if my opponent did bring a Flying Lord, I was a little worried that I'd have trouble defending him. It also generally, basically, this was just a survivability choice. And of course, he is very susceptible to being shot down by, say, Dark Shards or those sorts of things. So I was a little worried about that happening. Alongside him, for my other hero, I did bring a Night Goblin Shaman, coming in with Itchy Nuisance as well as Sneaky Stabbing. I do think these are two very good abilities, simply for the fact that they're fairly cheap on Winds of Magic, and you can use them to supplement the very expensive spells Azag has. Azag, of course, does also have Wa, and that does allow him to boost his front line and make him put out a little more damage. My Night Goblin Shaman, I also did put the Wand of Jet, which allows me to recharge my power reserves a little bit faster, or get a little more power reserves out for my spellcasting. For my front line, it is composed of a mix of Orc boys. Of course, these guys do have bronze shields, so they are a little tankier against enemy shooting, and they are fairly cheap. Backed by the two Night Goblin Regiments of Renown, the AP Cloonies, who are of course unbreakable, and then of course the Warlords boys, who have armor sundering. And I'm hoping that it will help back up my Orc boys in doing a little more damage. I do have a small firing line of the Rusty Heirs as well as Night Goblin Archers behind that, which gives me both poison and armor sundering, backed by 3 units of Black Orcs. And of course, the Black Orcs can hack and slash their way through especially when backed with magic or through the vast majority of Dark Elf infantry, including even Harkonneth Executioners. On the flanks, I do have, on this end, I do have the Mogreb's Mangy Marauders, as well as the Death Creepers. The Death Creepers, of course, do have Stalk as well as Regeneration, and the Mogreb's Mangy Marauders have Armor Piercing, which makes them rather useful. And of course, they can poke away and hopefully whittle down in units such as Harkonneth Executioners, or Witch Elves, or just shoot at the enemy lord, like, for example, Malekith. Here in the back, I do have the Durkit Squids, as well as the Squids, the Durkit Squigs, as well as the normal Night Goblin Squig Hoppers. And these guys, of course, have gotten a significant buff. They now have armor piercing on top of their bonus against infantry, and of course, they have poison and immunity to psychology. So I'm hoping to kind of use them to get into the enemy backline and just cause some major disruption. Out on the other flank, I also do have one more little combo or combination of skirmishers with a unit of Forest Goblin Spider Riders for that poison, as well as some Goblin Wolf Rider Archers, just to kind of poke away at my opponent, hoping to whittle down squishier units. My opponent has, as you can see, Vanguard deployed 2 Dark Riders, so definitely, this is on the Stir River, there's a lot of opportunity for Vanguard deployment, and we both kind of used it to the full almost, with my opponent having Dark Riders in my backline, and me having all of these skirmish units in his backline. In the meantime, the front line fight, of course, my opponent does have Malekith up in the air, who I'm poking away at right now with Archers. Of course, Malekith did come in with Soul Stealer, so he can heal a decent amount. He does have the Gaze of Malice for that disruption. Bladewind, a bit of an interesting choice. You don't see this Vortex all that often. And then, of course, he does have Power of Darkness to improve power reserves. You can see my poor Warlords boys are taking quite a bit of fire. My opponent does have a decent firing line of 2 Blackheart Corsairs with handbows, who aren't the greatest shooting units, but they are, of course, passable in melee, backed by 2 Dark Shards with shields. In his front line, he does have 3 Harkonneth Executioners, as well as Witch Elves to tie me down, and 3 Spearmen are covering the back line, so definitely a pretty powerful block of infantry or defense there. Unfortunately, I was not paying good enough attention, and I allowed 2 units of Dark Riders to get into my back line as I sent in the Black Orcs. That means the Dark Riders are definitely getting good value here, and what really shouldn't have happened. Should have just thrown the Black Orcs in against them, and the Black Orcs could have easily sliced and diced their way through this light cavalry. Fortunately, though, my Rusty Heirs do not quite route, neither do my Night Goblin Archers, and because of that, I'm able to really kind of pin my opponent in here and start slaughtering the Dark Riders as the frontline fight begins to degenerate. You can see Azag does throw himself into the Harkonneth Executioners and begins to womp on them, does also cast a Wa, and hopefully buffing a few of the units. And of course, the Black Orcs going in are going to slice and dice their way through the Harkonneth Executioners pretty effectively. These Harkonneth Executioners have already been whittled down a decent amount, and they are being now hit by Itchy Nuisance, which is making them significantly less effective. Over on the flank, you can see the Orc boys are actually trading pretty effectively with the Witch Elves, with the support of course, all this arrow fire, which is poisoning and weakening those Witch Elves. Here, Durkit Squigs, you can see, are sneaking around, and on the other end, we have had some Squig Hoppers get into the enemy backline, cause a little bit of damage to Harkonneth Executioners before being routed off. And the Black Orcs have really managed to hack and slash their way through these Dark Riders. Unfortunately, that does mean my Black Orcs were not committed, suited dealing with these Black Orc Corsairs in the front line, where the Hargoneth Executioner did a lot of work. My opponent does cast Power of Darkness on the Hargoneth Executioner, which I think is a bit of a mistake, as it does mean they are being drained of their HP even more than they were before. Meantime, the Black Orcs are marching onward and dealing with the Dark Shards' shields, and of course the Spearmen, even as the Witch Elves are slowly but surely chipped away at by all of this archery. Over here, the Durkit Squigs are chewing their way through these Black Orc Corsairs, who really don't stand a chance against the high armor piercing and bonus against infantry and poison of the Durkit Squigs. They're really well suited for chewing through this sort of infantry in a very cheap manner. Hargoneth Executioners over here are struggling against the Black Orcs. Black Orcs, of course, do have very high melee, or decent melee attack at 36, but very high weapon strength at 50, and backed by some poison, they are going to be able to really lay the hurt down on the Hargoneth Executioners. In the meantime, a Soul Stealer does go down, and it is causing some major damage to the poor Black Orcs, and that's definitely a bit of a problem for me. Azag is also being hit by this, and that is going to be a problem, as I obviously don't have any method by which I could bring him back his HP pool. In the meantime, my whole firing line is focused on Malekith, just trying to bring him down to size. Unfortunately, these Orc boys are out there, and I'm not on top of bringing them back into the fray. You can see the Warlords boys over here are chewing their way through the unit of Dark Elf Light Cavalry, some Dark Riders. They will do an okay job at just tearing them apart over time. Of course, you can see these Dark Shards of Shields are reforming. Azag is really low on HP and struggling, though he's helping with the help of the wall. Of course, he is helping chew through these Hargoneth Executioners, and slowly but surely we are really whittling through down these troops. These Witch Elves will not last for long once the Black Orcs get into the fray. You can see the Black Orcs do get rampaged, but it really doesn't matter because the Witch Elves are just so squishy they're going to get massacred. My opponent also does cast Power of Darkness on them, perhaps aiming it on the Spearmen, but on the Witch Elves it's going to force them to rout and ultimately probably shatter, and they really won't be coming back. In the meantime, these Orc boys are coming back into the fray. You can see my firing line very much focusing on Malekith, trying to whittle him down and hopefully either kill him or rout him off the field. You can see he does get a bit of a breath attack here while I wasn't paying attention, and it does quite a bit of damage, but nonetheless Malekith is definitely taking a beating from the vast concentrated fire of all of these nasty goblin shooting units. In the meantime, the spears are unfortunately getting on top of Mogre and Marauders because I'm not paying attention, and my opponent is definitely getting some major value here, especially with the help of that nasty Make's Malice. And of course, Malekith does manage to dive down and assassinate Azag, who simply has no way of surviving. Unfortunately, I didn't have Spirit Leech. I didn't manage to cast Spirit Leech, which I did attempt to do, and so he does manage to kind of sneak away here. Anytime my opponent's army has largely fallen apart, you can see the bar is definitely very much in my favor. He is casting another Power of Darkness on the Dark Shards with shields. Of course, that's going to drain them of some HP, probably take off a few models, but at the same time, it will give him a lot more points of magic. And you can see with the help of the goblins and all these units, I'm trying to kind of pursue my opponent's troops and hopefully get some good damage in. Unfortunately, you can see, of course, Fear and Terror does take control. That is one of the big problems with goblins as well as Orc boys. They're susceptible to Fear and Terror. So I'm really reliant here on my Black Orcs and their immunity to that sort of stuff, to all those nasty shenanigans, to stick around, of course, with the help of the shooting units. Here, in the meantime, you can see the Durkit Squigs are dashing in, tearing through these Hargoneth Executioners. I'm simply trying to get them off the field because they're one of the biggest threats remaining. Of course, the Black Orc Corsairs are a threat, but they are not. They are Quake, and I can't really catch them. They can really kite me. The Dark Shards with shields are another threat that I kind of need to get rid of, but as you can see, I've gotten rid of the Hargoneth Executioners, and that is definitely a big win in and of itself. In the meantime, you can see I do have a whole bunch of units that I'm trying to rally and pull back into the fray. The Death Creepers are still around and kicking, and of course with their regen they're able to recover a decent amount of HP, though they're definitely low on ammo. You can see the Mogrebs and Marauders coming around, and definitely my firing line is slowly but surely reforming. These Dread Spears are getting hacked and cut down, and my opponent is really starting to run a little low on troops. You can see I try to get some Durkit Squigs in here, and getting a small little charge in on the spears, but it doesn't quite work out, and I do get caught by Malekith, and he takes off 5 whole models on Durkit Squigs, which is definitely a little unfortunate at this stage of the game. You can see I do try to get some arrow fire into Malekith. In the meantime, over here, the Warlords boys are still trying to kite around, and we're trying to pick off these Dread Spears and really cripple my opponent's remaining troops. As you can see, definitely the bar is shifting in my favor, and unfortunately most of my opponent's troops are kind of vanishing into the woods here. I'm not really able to spot them, and I definitely waste some arrows here, killing off these Dread Spears, which is completely unnecessary. In the meantime, Malekith is being sneaky and just trying to fly around, even as I do try to pressure him away with missiles. I do have a lot of missile pressure, potentially, which is definitely very useful for me. And I'm hoping to make use of that to just kind of whittle him down and force him away, and keep him really off my army. Unfortunately, of course, I do have limited ammo, and the damage they're doing is not great against the 80 of the vast majority of these troops is not great against the high armor values. Or 80 armor is obviously not amazing, but fairly high armor values, stacked on top of course, his missile resistance and physical resistance. I'm not entirely sure it's being blocked by that, but 20% physical resist on top of 25% missile resist on top of 80 armor means that really the vast majority of my arrow fire is just not going through, and Malekith is very, very resistant against these sorts of attacks. That said, I'm trying to corner and kind of cut down these dread spears. I'm trying to get him, force him into the back of the map here, and really chop him down with this mob of infantry and the cavalry that I've got going. Unfortunately, I'm definitely allowing some troops such as the Warlords boys really to overextend in my efforts to catch him. You can see my opponent does still have a unit of dread spears over here in the back, who he has as of now not noticed and not pulled back into the fray. In the meantime, of course, you can see there are still some units shattering and running off the map, and of course, some units are going to start running out of ammo at this point, as I've not been too conservative with my usage of that. Malekith does dive down, and this is a slight mistake, as I do have a lot of poison troops here, and as you can see, the Death Creepers who do manage to land a little bit of poison damage on him, on Malekith. Of course, the Squigs, while they are very, very squishy and they will start dying, are actually immune to psychology, so they won't get terror-outed by Malekith's mere presence. And in the meantime, you can see I'm trying to just close on Malekith and keeping pinned on the ground. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work out, so we do go after the Dread Spears with the intent to kind of start wiping out my opponent's front line and hopefully open up his back line really for greater pressure. You can see the archery fire just going on Malekith, causes quite a bit of damage. Some spinning loons going out. The AP Cloonies are basically gone, so we're just trying to maximize whatever little we can get out of them as we wipe out these dread spears and really chop them down to size. The Orc boys are actually very good in this sort of situation. This is definitely one of those cost-effective moments for them, and once these guys are gone, my opponent's front line is effectively non-existent. Fortunately, he does have these dread spears in the back, and these guys are going to be able to start marching towards me from behind, and it also does mean that he does have some ground presence. Meantime, you can see Malekith gets a little cheeky here, dives in, perhaps hoping to get a bit of tear out. Black Orcs, of course, do not tear out, and I do get a nice little surround here with the Death Creepers. Death Creepers will struggle to hit, but they are fast enough to just stay on top of Malekith and whittle him down a little bit with the poison. And of course, with the back end of the Black Orcs are nasty units. They can do a lot of damage. You can see I do cast sneaky stabbing on them, and in a few hits, they're actually able to chop Malekith down a decent amount. Unfortunately, a very large segment of my army is routed. Of course, without Azag's presence to really stabilize him, there's nothing to keep him around, and of course, these guys are all wavering and struggling to stay on board. Really, the only thing sticking around at this point is a handful, the 2 units of Black Orcs, as well as my Shaman, and of course the Death Creepers, who are trying to keep Malekith grounded and in a position where I can hopefully wipe him out. Unfortunately, Malekith does still have a bit of a trick up his sleeve here, and he does get a nasty cast of Soul Stealer, which of course will allow him some massive healing and really bring him back into things. You can see the Black Orcs here are really struggling. They're very low on models at this point, and they're definitely going to start taking the hurt. And in spite of my efforts to cripple Malekith with Itchy Nuisance and make him neuter him a little bit, he does actually recover a good chunk of his HP, about 400, and is now kind of trashing my orcs there. In the meantime, you can see the Durkid Squigs are trying to sneak around, trying to get into the back line. You can see I've thrown the Forest Goblin Spider Riders into the fray against the Dark Shards, which is not, of course, the worst fight for them. They can do okay, and definitely, obviously, Dark Shards are not the best melee combatants. Over here, you can see I'm trying to keep the Death Creepers and the Black Orcs on top of Malekith. These courageous little Spider Riders trying to stay on top of this big, bad, nasty dragon, but it's really just not going to happen. Malekith is able to kind of wander away and slowly but surely start coming in up towards his troops. And of course, the Spider Riders can't do very much to him, and the Black Orcs, who are really my only hope of damaging him, are simply not able to keep up. They're just far too slow. Over here you can see the Durkid Squigs do plow into the Black Orc Corsairs, and while they definitely will do a good bit of damage, they do end up shattering. You can see these poor Night Goblins here just rampaging around and running away. The Orc Boys are also going to be shattered by Malekith's rear charge there. That is definitely going to put me in a very rough spot. And you can see the balance of power, which was very much my favorite just a little while ago, is slowly but surely coming back into my opponent's control. You can see the small unit of Orc Boys here is barely sticking around, wavering. You can see these Black Orcs are shattered, and now that my Rusty Arrows, who I was really hoping would do some damage to Malekith, do shatter themselves. Fortunately, the Death Creepers, who are actually a passable unit in melee, they do have 24 melee attack, 32 melee defense, actually get a good chunk of damage here on the Black Orc Corsairs, picking off quite a few models, and Malekith doesn't manage to land the best of charges there. And that is going to allow me to really start regrouping and isolate these Dread Spears. I do shift focus onto them with the Death Creepers. As you can see, they actually show the charge bonus of 14 and decent weapon strength at 26. They can, of course, hit somewhat hard and disrupt my opponent. My opponent now does have a unit of Dark Shards who potentially could do a lot of damage to the Black Orcs. They do still have almost half their models. And so what I'm trying to do at this point, plow through the Black Orc Corsairs, get into the Dark Shards, and hopefully have my Black Orcs still healthy enough to contest. Unfortunately, you can see Malekith here does come down to defend his little buddies. I do actually cast Sneaky Stabbing on the Death Creepers, and this might seem a little strange, but it does give him a bonus to melee attack, which I'm hoping could help me keep Malekith grounded by causing that poison to be hitting consistently. I'm also hoping to really rout off these Black Orc Corsairs. Unfortunately, because we are fighting on the map edge, any routing at this point runs the risk of that unit never coming back, as it will rout off immediately. You can see these Black Orc Corsairs will not come back, neither will these Dark Shards once they are routed, and it's going to leave me and my opponent with basically no army presence on the ground. You can see over here the Black Orcs are still fleeing, as are the spears over there. And now with the shatter of the Dark Shards, it is definitely down to the wire. You can see the Black Orcs over here courageously charging in after Malekith, who's jumping around and chomps down on some poor Black Orcs there. And look at that, Seraphon is one nasty mean dragon, but definitely the Black Orcs are kind of diving in, trying to do as much damage as they can. I do cast the Sneaky Stab, and I'm almost out of Winds of Magic at this point. I've obviously used the Wand of Jet and all that sort of stuff. You can see the Black Orcs, with their immune psychology, are just sticking through thick and thin. Their weapon strength was buffed by a very significant amount when they... And you can see Malekith is dropping there. He does manage to tear out my Shaman, which makes me worry greatly that at this point it's going to be game. But the Black Orcs are sticking around, at least for a little last hurrah, even as the Night Goblin Shaman is fleeing. And things are definitely very close. Now you can see Malekith is wavering, both troops wavering. The Shaman does stabilize, though of course he has no more Winds of Magic. And even as I'm sending the Shaman back in, Malekith does finally shatter, giving you pure victory. So really a game that was right down to the wire. A few mistakes I made was obviously allowed Azak to get assassinated. I could have easily avoided this by perhaps honestly putting him on Skull Muncher if I dropped the unit of Night Goblins, Crowhoppers, and of course the Chevrons and the Orc Boys. I could have most likely crammed Azag onto Skull Muncher just by fiddling around with points a little bit, and that would have given him the mobility to really evade Malekith and at the same time still be a very decent and useful presence. So perhaps it was a mistake to keep it on foot. I did think it would keep him alive a little better, but in retrospect it might not have been the best idea. Otherwise, the Orc Boys performed somewhat well, definitely at line breaking against later on against the Squishier troops, but they definitely suffered. I definitely had a poor commitment, throwing the Orc Boys and the Night Goblins in against the Harkonnens Executioners, and only committing the Black Orcs later when it was kind of late. And if things had been more synchronized, if I'd been a little more on top of shutting down the Dark Riders, I could have definitely done a better job there. And crushed the Harkonnens Executioner much more decisively. The Night Goblin Archers did okay, though they definitely struggled a little bit. They're not the greatest against Malekith, and in retrospect, I'm not entirely sure that the Night Goblin Archers were even worth bringing. I might have just been better off bringing the roster of Skirmish Cav here and keeping the Rusty Arrows for that debuff, but ditching the normal Night Goblin Archers. They simply weren't really providing that much support against the enemy flyer. The Witch Elves got completely trashed, which I was pretty surprised by. Jerkit Squigs, of course, did some immense work. I'm definitely liking Squig Hoppers, the way they've been reworked. They're very, very potent. Death Creepers also did some great work. And, yeah, Black Orcs carrying, as always. For my opponent, you can see definitely he has got some great performance out of his Dark Riders in the very short time they were on the map. The Harkonnens Executioners did some monstrous work, and of course Malekith himself did some monstrous work, so that was definitely rather brutal, and the game definitely came down to the wire. It's a great game to my opponent here, MTang49. I do hope you guys enjoyed it and found it entertaining. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to post them down in the comments, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.